everyone, and welcome to the Las Vegas Sports Services NBA Weekly Report. I'm John Cranton in Las Vegas, joined by Jeff Saad, who runs LVSS. We're going to take a look at the NBA playoffs, the upcoming games 3 and 4. We have some free picks for you, some NBA betting trends, and some analysis of the Final Four, the 4 teams remaining. But first, Jeff, this week you hit your NBA total of the year. That was Game 1, Miami and Indy over the total. Didn't even need overtime for that. And you have been red hot in the baseball, too. Tell folks how they can get aboard the first special.
Yeah, total of the year wasn't that easy, but it was still a winner. I'm on a 6-1 run in the NBA playoffs, and in baseball, I am 35-22 since May 4th. I'm going to give you 2 weeks of NBA playoff action plus baseball, 14 days, $14, $1 a day, and that will include my NBA playoff game of the year. You can play 2 sports, build your bankroll, call LVSS at 1-866-575-8916. That's 14 days, $14, $1 a day, NBA and baseball. 1-866-575-8916.
Okay, we got a pair of middle games coming up here. We'll start with the Memphis and the San Antonio series. The series shift this weekend to Memphis for games 3 and 4. And they're down 0-2 in the series, but Memphis opened up a 4.5-point favorite for game number 3, and it's been bet up to 5.5. And we've seen quite a bit of action on the total too, from 180 down to 177.5. So the sharp guys, as well as the general public, seem to be saying this is going to be a slow-paced tempo game, and that's certainly what Memphis being at home is all about. Jeff, do you think Memphis may slow it down?
Yeah, they'll try, but the Spurs can play either style, up-tempo or slow down. The thing about the Spurs, though, as what happened in Game 2, they have these lulls where they can't shoot or miss free throws. I mean, there's no excuse of blowing a big lead like that on your home court. I had the Grizzlies out of the game, and I don't know how I won it. At halftime, I thought I was dead in the water, but they came back and they went to overtime. They covered a spread. But the Spurs do have those times when they don't play well for a period of time during the game. They did it against the Warriors. The reason the line's gone up, I think, is because of that trend. If a team is down 0-2 going home, you want to take that team. That's probably why the line has gone up a little bit, and the total's gone down because people think that it's going to be a slow down game. The Spurs have done a great job there with Zach Randolph. He's only 7-26 the first 2 games. The under is 13-3-1 in the Spurs' last 17 road games. The under is 12-5 in the Grizzlies' last 17 home games. There's another reason why the total might be going down. But right now, I will lean toward the Grizzlies because I like that 0-2 trend too when you go home. But we'll have to wait and see that one done. This series will probably. I still think the Spurs win the series in 6 games or less, John.
Yeah, the first 2 games we saw San Antonio win easily, 105-83 the first game. And Game 2 was a strange game as San Antonio again was in command for 3 quarters, and then a very bizarre fourth quarter ended up forcing overtime, and the Spurs won 93-89. But here are some things that have stood out about this series for me, and they all heavily favor the San Antonio Spurs. Nobody really talks a lot about the Spurs defense because they have so much offensive potential, flexibility, depth, and long-range shooting. But look what they did defensively in the first 2 games. They held Memphis to 43% shooting in the first game, and then that overtime game, just 34% for the game. So they've been phenomenal on defense. Tony Parker did get an MRI coming into the weekend for his calf, but really, from what we hear, it's not that big of a deal. It was a bruise that he had about 12 days ago, and he says that I'm fine for this. So that's not really a concern at this point. And one of the strategic moves that Greg Popovich did that's been so impressive is he's basically packing the paint against Memphis. He's saying, we're going to go physical against your big guys and go ahead and let your guards try and beat us long range. Now, the results of that are mixed with one exception, and that is the 2-0 lead that they have. And when you look at Game 2, Memphis had a big edge, a 14-point edge in rebounding, including a phenomenal edge in offensive rebounding, 19-4. However, the physical play in the low post has been outstanding for their field goal shooting percentage defense on Memphis. And, as you mentioned, Zach Randolph, smaller than Gasol, and that physical play seems to have taken a little bit of an edge off of his game. He has not shot well at all. And so the way I see it, that and their road play and their experience is going to be a huge factor for San Antonio. I don't really agree with this number. I think that it's dead even. It should be closer to a pick 'em, and I can see San Antonio taking charge, going up 3-0 in this series. So I kind of like them quite a bit, even when the series ships to Memphis this weekend. Okay, the other game in the East is you got the powerhouse Miami Heat team, 66 regular season wins, the defending champs. And then if anybody's going to beat him, maybe a team that can play defense and rebounding. Well, that's exactly what they're facing in Indiana. Question is, which team has the fewest number of flaws, and can Indiana hang with Miami even when it shifts back to Indiana over the next week?
Yeah, I've read some reports that the Heat are exposing some of their flaws because they had that close game in Game 1, but I don't see it. I know every team has flaws, but Miami has far fewer than anybody else left in the playoffs. They lost to Chicago the first game, after a long layoff. They had a rough time the other night after a long layoff. Now they have the luxury of making adjustments and not being rusty, but still having a 1-0 lead in the series. So right now, I would still favor the Heat a lot in this series, not only in Game 2, but even the rest of the series. In NBA history, the road team loses Game 1 of a 7-game series in overtime. They've only come back to win the series 20% of the time. Ray Allen's had a bad game. He's gonna bounce back. The Heat scored 60 points in the paint in Game 1 against the Pacers. And then in the regular season, they only averaged 30.7 points per game in the paint. That three-pointer saved the Pacers at the end, also saved my total, but I still think the Heat wins this series in 5 or 6 games. It's going to be the same as last series when they lost to the Bulls, came back and won the next game by 37 points. They won't win by 37 again, but I think they'll get the win and cover in Game 2, and then win the series maybe 5 or 6 games, John.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's going to be a relatively quick series, even though after that first game, a lot of people said, hey, this is a tough matchup from Miami, and it may be a long series. I'm not agreeing with that. One thing that did stand out about actually the 2 games that they played, one in the regular season, and that is the strategy that Miami is doing. If you remember, early in the season, the first 2 games were played in Indianapolis, and the Pacers won by double digits each time. And so the rebounding and defense stood out. But in that last regular season meeting was in March. It was the first game that was in Miami, and the Heat had kind of a chip on their shoulder, hearing about how they lost the first 2. Well, they beat Indiana by 14, and what they did is they attacked the low post. Now, the rebounding edge still went to Indiana only by +5. But what they did is they attacked, and it was as if they were saying to the Pacers, we know what your strength is. It's the big guys up front and your rebounding. But you know what? We're not afraid of that. We're going to come right after you. Well, we saw the exact same thing happen in Game 1 of this series. The Heat, surprisingly, came right at Miami, and during the playoffs, Miami had only been averaging 30 points per game in the low post. Well, Game 1 against Indiana, they doubled that with 60 points. Very good strategic move. The thing about the Miami Heat that's so impressive is this coaching staff. I'm not sure if it's Eric Spoelstra is an above-average coach. He probably is, or whether it's Pat Riley meeting with him and going over game films. But this is a team that is never out-coached, and it's very impressive how they approach these games. And as you mentioned, there's very little weaknesses, too, with Miami. So I kind of suspect going to Indianapolis, a lot of people are going to expect the Pacers to put on their great defense and their rebounding. But this Miami team has so few flaws. And when you think back to what happened last year, the Heat won the last 3 games of the series, and the Pacers gave up over 100 points in every game. So there are flaws that can be exploited against the Pacers, too, and I think is a major concern. It might not be as long a series as many people expect. Okay, let's go with some free plays for the weekend. Do you see any totals out there that might stand out?
Yeah, I'm taking the Spurs and Grizzlies in Game 3 to stay under the total for your free play this weekend. The Spurs, Grizzlies, Game 3, under the total, John.
Okay, and I'm going to go with the Memphis game on Saturday, Memphis-San Antonio. The Spurs are now 7-3 against the spread the last 10 meetings with Memphis. I like them as an underdog. Play the Spurs on Saturday in Game 3. Jeff, you've been red hot in baseball, and you hit your NBA total of the year, plus you have a big one coming up next week. How can folks get aboard at a special rate?
Yeah, 35-22 in baseball since May 4th, 6-1 run in the NBA playoffs. You can get 2 weeks, 14 days, $14, $1 a day. Call, it's going to include my NBA playoff game of the year. Call LVSS at 1-866-575-8916, 8-9-1-6.
All right, very good. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Jeff and I will be back next Friday with another NBA report from Las Vegas Sports Services. Good luck with the games, everyone.